Phoenicians, however, stoutly resisted Greek penetration beyond Gibraltar. So Greeks had a rough time. There's a bit of friction there between them. But on the southern coast of Gaul, the Phocaeans established a city of prime importance. Massilia, or Marseille today, Marseilles, became the chief center of Greek culture in the western Mediterranean. She founded colonies in Gaul and Spain, and from them the natives learned to speak and write Greek. Skipping just a bit here. We must accordingly regard the Phocaeans as the forerunners of Rome in the work of civilizing southwestern Europe. Meanwhile, the Ionians were sailing through the Hellespont, that's what we call the Bosphorus today, up into the Black Sea area, and the Propontis, and along the coast of the Black Sea to catch the tunny fish, T-U-N-N-Y fish, to trade with the natives and to plant settlements on all the shores. Miletus, a great colonizing state, is said to have founded 80 in this region, and most important of which were Cyzicus, Olbia, O-L-B-I-A, Panticapaeum, and Sinope, S-I-N-O-P-E. Although Greek settlements surrounded the Black Sea in a nearly unbroken chain, their civilization failed to penetrate far into the interior or to materially affect the natives. And remember that pottery, the rich people were buried with ceremonial pottery from the Greeks, all through the southern lands of Russia. For such results, the settlers were all too few. They didn't bring enough, even though they had a bunch of settlements. 80 in this region from Miletus alone. The Black Sea region furnished Greece with useful products, especially fish, timber, dye, wheat, metals, cattle, and slaves. Especially those things, and other stuff. On the Bosphorus, however, rose a great city, Byzantium, the most famous among the colonies of Megara. On the opposite Asiatic shore was Chalcedon, an earlier foundation by Megara. Byzantium was situated on a spacious bay in touch with migrating shoals of fish, an exhaustless source of wealth to the inhabitants. Their command of the strait enabled them to levy tolls on passing ships, while splendid opportunities for commerce, combined with a strong defensible position, further contributed to their prosperity. 1,000 years after its founding, this city, under the name Constantinople, became the capital of the Roman Empire. Thank you for the Greek city-state of Megara, having originally founded the site that was later Istanbul, or Constantinople. In another direction, Greek enterprise was to bear rich intellectual fruit. About the middle of the 7th century, Psammaticus, P-S-A-M-M, Psammaticus, with Ionian and Carian aid, made himself master of Egypt. Okay, so he's got Greek ties, becomes the ruler of Egypt. Being friendly to the Greeks, he and his dynasty permitted a settlement of Ionian traders on the Canobic channel of the Nile. And they permitted this to grow. A great trading post, now Crates, developed. And here, under the protection of the government, various Greek cities of Asia Minor and the neighboring islands, together with Aegina, established their warehouses. So a bunch of city-states come in and set up warehouses in this little trading, like a free trade zone of the ancient Egyptian nation. To the opening of Egypt, therefore, we may trace in part the great intellectual awakening of Greece. So they had their foot in the door in Egypt, then Greece itself had this intellectual awakening, and then Egypt, of course, was pried open. Later to have the library at Alexandria in its possession, and Alexandria, of course. The effects of Greek colonization were, of course, immense, though Phoenicians and Etruscans, and in places an inhospitable shore, had prevented the Greeks from settling everywhere. Nevertheless, their settlements were numbered by the hundred and were scattered along the coasts of the Mediterranean and of its tributary waters. Colonization meant that the surplus population of a virile race found an outlet and that the needy gained land, that trade increased. It meant, too, a broadening of the Greek horizon, a steady penetration of new ideas from other countries, and, inevitably, Hellenism. Greek culture was bestowed in varying degree upon the peoples of the Mediterranean basin. That's the beautiful, happy ending. Well, we're not ending here, but that's the happy bit. The Greek culture, Hellenism, was bestowed across the Mediterranean, laying the foundations for Pax Romana, the Roman peace. We wonder what the roots of Roman toleration are. In the West, for example, the Italian and Sicilian Greeks were a mighty factor in the civilization of Italy, and through Italy, of Central and Western Europe. Intersperse a full paragraph of Marxist tripe, nonsense, middle class, yada yada. During the geometric period, barter had been given up in favor of iron spits. Then, in the 8th century, the Lydians invented metallic coinage, at first striated pieces of electrum, a natural amalgam of gold and silver. The custom quickly passed to Ionia, and from the early 7th century, regular Ionian and Lydian issues may be dated from the early 7th century, 690s, 80s, 70s. West of the Aegean Sea, the people of Aegina were the first to stamp their coins, silver straighters of about 12.3 grams. They had wide currency. Corinth was not far behind Aegina in coinage. Its standard coin was a silver didrachm, D-I-D-R-A-C-H-M, weighing about 8.6 grams, and therefore much lighter than the Aeginetan. This standard was adopted by Chalkis and Eretria in Euboea, and also by Athens, and came to be known as the Euboic Standard. We mentioned the Euboic Standard, I believe, when we were in Star, History of the Ancient World. The invention of coinage, of course, greatly promoted commerce, but at the same time, its introduction into an agrarian world was destined to have profound social consequences, for a new form of wealth independent of land was now possible. So it was the introduction of the non-agrarian society. That's what coinage helped facilitate and make possible. Now, of course, he goes off on 2 solid paragraphs of Marxist tripe, which we'll get through. Just take the good parts out, skipping down a ways. The aristocracies were threatened on many fronts, and on most of them they went down before an upheaval of the people. Again, coming towards democracy, it's the people, the oppressed, the downtrodden, the upheaval of the people. It wasn't intellectuals who gave the culture good ideas and made them assert themselves or anything. Still, in every case, there was a special reason. So, generally it was an upheaval of the people, but in each case something agitated them. General unrest was not enough. A specific crisis was needed. Tripe, 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 tripe. The procedure which the people used in ridding themselves of the hated system was to rally round an individual, not infrequently a noble turned democrat, and so to overthrow the existing aristocracy. A person who thus seized the reins of government illegally was known as a tyrant. In its origin, a word imported from Lydia, where the example of tyranny had first been set by Gyges, G-Y-G-E-S. The word tyrant carried in the beginning no opprobrium. Tyranny has sometimes been considered a peculiar Greek institution, a sort of interregnum between the rule of the few and the many. As I mentioned earlier, did away with the kings, then we have the rule of the aristocracy. Then we do away with the rule of aristocracy for the rule of a tyrant in favor of the people. Then we do away with him and have rule of the people. Weird stuff. Actually, however, tyranny was a necessary, though at the moment an unconscious step on the road to democracy, for in the days before the democratic process had been worked out, the natural thing for the masses to do was first, under a leader, destroy the present system. That was their first impulse, kind of like Soviet Russia did.